We have about an hour now to discuss on the topics Hans mentioned in his presentation and even more. But I would like to start by asking you, do you feel that there is a wider general understanding that this whole open data thing, it's a good thing? We should move there. We should make the effort and go forward with it. Are we past that question, or is it still a question? I don't know who starts. Hans, you can start.
I think it depends very much on the industry that you're working in. I remember, and maybe it's still, probably it's not current in Estonia, but I remember at least in Belgium a couple of years ago, we still had a lot of debate about the openness of public transportation information, which now seems very silly. But the idea was that if trains and buses and trams make their data openly available, then anybody can build applications and people can choose which application gives them the best information on how to get from A to B, which nowadays everybody does. But even 3 or 4 years ago, public transportation companies said, no, we don't want to do that because we want people to use our apps. We want to be the only source of information. They have to use our apps, and then they can also buy our tickets. And I don't know if that's just conservatism or if it's economic. They say, well, I want people to come to my apps because then they'll buy more easily from me.
Well, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I have the data, I want to sell it.
Yes, but that's, it depends on, that's why I said it depends on the sector. It shouldn't make sense for public transportation because it's publicly funded. You shouldn't be looking at how can we send money to public transportation companies. You should be looking at how can we create the best value for society as a whole. And I think that societal factor is a very important one. It becomes a lot more complicated when you look at private industries, look at banks, for instance, and how they have to work and how they have to share their data. It changes your business model, and you always have to make the assessment, is society going to win by forcing this change of the business model? And if so, we have to do it even if an individual company is going to suffer for it. Or are we going to actually harm innovation? Are we going to lose economic benefits by forcing openness? And the big threat there is always if you say, well, you have to make your data available, and the owners, stewards of that data will say, well, if I have to share my data, then I'm not going to invest anymore because what's the point? And that's the pitfall, the trap that you always have to be able to avoid.
Kai, what's the mood in the ministry?
Well, it is not in the ministry only, but I think in Estonian society in general, rather controversial, because, well, if I compare Estonian or Estonians with other European countries, then I think Estonians are more pro transparency and data sharing in general. But again, if it comes to your personal data, or if it comes to your trade secrets or your business models, then people or companies are more towards keeping their data. But I think the mood is rather positive in general.
And your personal, does your personal opinion matter in this? Are you working to get more data open? If people come to you and say, yeah, we should open this, we should do that.
I think, the first thing is to ask not whether to open it or not. The first thing to ask is actually, is it possible to use it in that sense that I don't see the problem in general in Estonia that about the openness. I see the quality. The data quality is a bigger problem.
All right. Andres, what's your opinion? It's always easier not to do things.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what you were asking was that are we like past this question, whether we should do it. I think it very much depends from who you ask. I mean, so my everyday work is to protect privacy in a large-scale data processing company. The whole business is processing data, in personal and less personal way. If you ask from those people there, for sure they know about the background, but if you ask from people on the streets, I mean, the public opinion, I'm not so sure that they even understand what you like in a good way. I mean, they maybe don't have to, but if you show the outcome, maybe that's something that we are lacking. Like, we are not doing it because we try to see what you're doing in your bedroom. We are trying to do this to do it more efficiently, what we've done for 100 years already, and maybe to also change the strong opinions to the facts, actually, to make a good decision in a public sector from our own money, I mean.
Peeter, we will now move to you. What's your opinion on this? Is this a good thing? Is there a general agreement that yes, this is good, let's move forward with it?
Okay, first, it was a two-pronged question. Is it a good thing, and what is my opinion on whether the public thinks it's a good thing?
Yes, I'm talking to a lawyer here, yes.
In my personal opinion, yes, open data is indeed a good thing, coming from the philosophy that rising tide lifts all boats, and this open data is a means to reduce duplicate work on the same topic. As for what the general public thinks, I think general public doesn't care, doesn't understand, and doesn't even think about it.
You may be right. I mean, I cannot argue
Those
with you.
people who care are here,
Yeah.
in this room. So
But I think also that that's a good thing. I mean, for most policy issues, I think it's it won't work very well to say, well, we need to explain this to people and they need to understand what they're doing and they need to have an opinion about it. I think the understanding, the level of understanding that the general public will have is, somebody has to walk up to them and say, hey, here's a cool app or a cool service that you can use. And it should be completely invisible to them how it works and whether there's an open data component behind that. And I think if that part of the puzzle works, I don't think that general awareness within the general public that's really necessary. I think the rising tide lifting all boats is I think it's a good sign. What people need to notice is the tide rising and their boat going up, and what's happening under the waves. I think we should make that as invisible as possible to them, ideally, I think.
Peeter.
that's an interesting point. You mentioned the people or the general population as consumers of apps, consumers of data, consumers of various solutions. Reminded me of Cory Doctorow's essay on the death of general purpose computing. And I think this is a very broad problem that the societies are turning into huge herds of consumers. You're not supposed to think, you're not supposed to tinker, you're not supposed to really create. Be content in your assigned boxes.
Well,
Consume.
trust into governing systems and awareness are two different things, I think, here. Awareness as such is very much needed. And I don't think people or general public is considered as consumers. Most of them are well, maybe it's my personal view, but it is meant, I mean, open data as such is not meant for so much for consumers as such, but it is meant for businesses to innovate, to create something that is beneficial for the the whole society, not only just for economic reasons. And I don't see a general public as consumers in that sense. They need to know how to opt out or opt in if necessary. But it's for the governing systems, and not meaning only government as such, or central government, governing systems to create that trust that there are some rules or regulations, self-regulation or laws or whatever rules that are obeyed, and that creates the trust into these, even if people are consumers.
Okay, let's take a more concrete example. Let's say that I'm running a smallish public sector organization. I'm the head of this organization, and now I'm hearing people like you going around, talking something about open data, a coherent picture of what data my organization is, what's coming in, what's going out, how is the security, how is the privacy, and what am I thinking? Am I confused as a head of this organization? I'm not a data scientist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a privacy specialist. I would say I'm probably confused, and I wouldn't want to really touch this subject at all. You're nodding, Hans. Is this familiar to you?
And this has always been the challenge in public sector information. I mentioned that earlier on. This was really, for most administrations, forced upon them 20, 25 years ago already. Along with right to information legislation, where public administrations generally say, look, I already have a job and I'm doing that. Why are you throwing this additional work on me? And understandably, there's limited appetite for it, because typically as a public administration, you will not get additional resources for this. So it's an additional thing that you have to do in addition to your official tasks. And civil servants generally, and nobody would like that. I wouldn't like it either. It's not about civil servants. I have my job already, so I don't want to get additional work. But this is also why it's important, I think, at the national level to have support mechanisms available, like those support centers, not just to help people build applications and services, but also to answer very practical questions on what makes sense. I don't think it's realistic for very small administrations to be able to answer all of these questions, and certainly not to build applications or services. And if you look at, I'm sure it's the same in Estonia, you have public administrations where there are 2 or 3 people, probably 1 of 2 are working part-time. So are they going to follow GDPR training and build APIs? That's never going to happen. So then you need to have organizations that provide support to them, either within that sector, within similar administrations, or just at the national level. You need to take that work out of their hands, which is also partially why these portals at the national level and at the European level were created to begin with. It's not just about having a central repository for users of the data. That was one part of the story, but also just from the experience that public administrations were just saying, this is insane. I cannot do this. This is not, I don't have the skills, I don't have the resources. Also, you're not giving me additional skills and resources, you're just giving me additional work, and that's not going to work.
Let me turn to the Estonians here. How is the situation in Estonia?
I think most Estonian public institutions are overloaded with data they don't need, actually. Because I think there are, of course, obviously historical reasons, because there was not possible to change or exchange and reuse data, and so every institution just collected all the data they think they need, or they are going to need, and it is well, at least we see from the legislation. Very common example. There's a provision in an act of something, whatever act, that we need that data for statistics. Are you going to make the statistics? No. We will send it to your agency, statistic agency, or they are doing just for themselves to monitor or observe some kind of activities. But they are not thinking whether they actually need that data. So, and the second thing is that I think that the data is not well accurate in that sense that a lot of data is coming just from different sources, and the quality of data is very low.
Gentlemen, what's your opinion? Is there a clear process, situation, picture, something in Estonia that would help people getting started with this open data thing, and you know, they can do it in a way that they feel is understandable and comfortable and safe for them?
I think it's, well, one thing, it takes time, it takes awareness raising a lot. Maybe the fears are always like bigger if you don't know exactly that what it means. As you said, like it's I don't know what you are talking about, so I say no, just in case. But as Hans said, maybe everyone doesn't need to know and see what's going on, like beneath that, like nice layer on top of this huge complexity. But I think the thing is, what we need to show is what is the outcome, or if we can ask right questions. You might have a lot of good data, bad quality or good quality. If you don't know the question, it's useless. It's just something, information, or not even information, but maybe to educate, to show that, okay, let's see what are the problems that we face. Let's try to, our everyday problems, goals, working plans, whatever, annual plans, let's try to solve some of those with the big data, from the help outside, with experts, whatever needed. And if you feel like a success story with yourself involved, then you might, you know, hooked up with this. Something like that.
I remember these stories from the Soviet times where everybody was heating their apartments in the winter, but at the same time kept the windows open because the heating was essentially free. Or, you know, they would steal and waste petrol fuel as much as possible because it was essentially free.
Yeah. You know, it still goes on, but only if you have a heat meter for your the whole apartment house.
Yeah.
If you put separate, they close the windows.
But I
mean, the feeling that I'm only a small part of it, but there's a lot of responsibility going on somewhere else also. But if you're like the one that
I'm responsible.
Yeah, then you start acting.
But I kind of have the feeling that we are in the same point with data. It's like not only public sector, but also private sector. You know, I will throw you a form, and heck, if I'm already asking you questions, I will ask you a few questions more. You know, I want to know how old you are you a man or a woman, you know, do you have a dog? Just in case, I will throw these questions in without even thinking, do I actually need this data? Do I need to ask you this? Am I getting this correctly? We have lots of data, we have no idea why we have it.
And furthermore, we do have lots of data, and as we also have these nice new draconian laws and regulations, 20 million euro axe hanging just over your shoulder, if you do something wrong with personal data. So these kind of, this rising tide and lifting boats, that's some yada yada. Maybe it happens, but this danger is clear and present. And I'd rather not open anything. I'd rather not do anything, especially if it's additional work and no compensation for me. So I have seen this kind of attitude and thinking a lot with in public sector as well as private.
But do we have these processes, for example, in the public sector, these support mechanisms, people and places you go ask for information, or clear instructions at least, something that's uniform, vetted, it has a stamp, somebody said, yes, this is good, do it like this.
I think most public institutions have their data security officers. There are, of course, guidelines coming from. I just started to read, for example, guidelines on consumer online services from the Article 29 working group from Brussels. So I think there is plenty of information. Of course, there are not so many cases because, well, guidelines are always abstract, and they should be abstract. But I think good practices and discussions among professionals, there are, circles where people actually discuss these things. So I don't think, at least on governmental level, there is a lack of awareness. There's a problem on local government level, especially in smaller local governments. And because their activities also on collecting data has not been so much regulated, with internal regulations. So that is worrying me much more than governmental level.
So my data could be sitting in a very old, very small computer somewhere very far from Tallinn.
Exactly.
And I have no idea it's there, and I have no idea how it's
because
how safe
you
it is.
visited your grandmother and she said to the social worker that, I have this support mechanism called Henrik.
Mm-hmm. And he's making lots of money.
Yeah.
And then the tax board says,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Should we have Estonians seem to like these very detailed, concrete laws that say, do this, and this is how you do things. Should we have a process like this in the form of law? How to open up very small organizations to open data?
No.
No? But
No.
it would help, wouldn't it?
No.
The problem is that regulating something like open data is, I feel, just a little bit too big a piece to bite. As even the old school classical, the copyright thing that's 300 years old and most people should understand it, they don't. And when we speak about data, then it's not just the creator's rights and the user's rights, but also the data subject's rights. So instead of a line, we have a triangle. The possible interplays of these rights against one and another become so complex that it's almost impossible to write all-encompassing, very detailed, very concrete law that actually manages to regulate anything.
Okay, so no law then. I will turn
But
to
there is no need for a specific law. I mean, data and open data and using data. It's not another universe in that sense. It's believe or not, but the same rules that are applied to this bottle or to this table can actually use for data most of the time. So, or if not the rules for physical things, then the rules for rights as copyright or trade secrets, for example. So, well, I'm arguing here that the regulation is there. I mean, and we just need to amend maybe some specific parts, as we have data protection regulation, for example. But everything else is already existing.
Well, people tell me there are mainly two reasons when somebody decides not to open up data. One, they say it's for security reasons, internal security or personal data. And also people tell me in many cases it's overused. It's like this very good shell you can just crawl into and say, no, I will not do anything because it has sensitive data or personal data in it. Hans, you have probably seen these situations.
Well, absolutely. I think the main issue is that people don't want to respond and then look for reasons why they are allowed not to respond. So it's reverse engineering of the legislation, is looking up the reasons. Step one is looking up the exceptions that allow you to say no. So, but I think part of that is also about and I think as a society we don't think about that enough, but we have much higher expectations nowadays from our public sector than we had 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. If you look at the level of professionalization that's been expected from any kind of public administration, it's gigantic. We do expect them to all to have understanding. We're talking now about information security and about data protection, but beyond that, they also need to comply with taxation rules and with social security, on transparency rules, administrative organization. They have to worry about administrative appeals, constitutional issues, even and human rights, and we all expect every administration to know that. So I think a lot of this this debate sort of fits with a broader challenge that we have, which is about just scaling up organizations to the level that they can deal with that. And I know there's at a very basic level, if you just look at the size of an average commune in Belgium, I think we have 571, I think off the top of my head, communes with about 15,000 citizens on average. But that's distorted, obviously, because you have Brussels and Antwerp and a couple of big ones. There's I think about 60% has less than 10,000 people, and they still have to be able to organize themselves as professionally. Just for comedy purposes, the smallest city in Belgium, I think, has 98 or 88 people, and they have a mayor and they have a city council. So pretty much everybody who lives there has to work for the community because somebody from the community has to do the job. That's just not feasible anymore for those people to have the right expertise. So, and in Belgium they try to solve that by providing fiscal encouragement for communes to merge spontaneously.
We have exactly the same process in
It's the same, and the trend is for people to move more and more to cities. So you have more and more smaller villages that are losing their population, and somehow we still expect them to do this work, and that doesn't work. And I'm not saying that all small villages have to merge together into one, but if you don't do that, then at least you have to provide support structures to those smaller communes and smaller administrations so that they can focus on their core tasks, which are often challenging enough for them already, and keep the debates of principle at a different level. And one of the ideas hasn't been implemented anywhere as far as I know, but one of the ideas is potentially to say, usually you have national archiving rules or regional archiving rules. At the commune level, once they're done with a file, they send it to the archive. And if you ask them what happens then, on average, they will say, I don't know. They told me I need to send it to the archive, and I have no idea how long it stays there or what's done with that. Well, that means that that's a good place where the archive is a good place where you can build more expertise around, for instance, statistical research, around handling data subject rights, around information security, and try to disseminate that. That's also controversial because it means centralization, and communes typically say, I don't want centralization, this is my competence, this is my administration, I do it the way I like. But at some point you have to match our rightly higher expectations of professionalism with the need to provide the resources.
But I agree, but do you think that it can be done, should it be done through offering personalized consultation services to these communities. Like there's a smart man or a woman in Tallinn, and if your community has a problem with open data, he will jump in the car and drive to you and help you out. Or should it be more like a box of instructions or a law?
Part of it is also infrastructural. Part of this is also where you used to just say, look, these are your tasks as a commune, and you find a way to solve them. Where now, and that happens, I'm sure, in Estonia as well, where at the central government level they say, look, we've already built applications for you that you can use for managing citizen registrations, for handling births, for handling marriages, cloud-based services, because that's how the entire planet now works. You should use that. You can use something else if you want, but then you're going to have to do a lot more homework because we don't have the infrastructural support behind that. And I think this is also part of the way you professionalize a lot of industries, just saying these are the tools, you don't have to use them, but believe me, you have a big problem to solve if you don't use them. And faced with that choice, most people will ultimately say, you know what, I'll pick the one that I can use, that's ready-made, and that ticks all of the boxes. And that also makes it a lot easier for you to provide support. And not everything can be standardized, and not everything can be turned into infrastructure. There will always be targeted questions where people will say, look, a citizen is asking for a copy of this or that data, and I don't know, I can get it from the application, I just don't know whether I'm allowed to say yes. And then indeed you have to have a sort of a help desk function behind that. Not necessarily someone who will go to the commune to build things, because that's not efficient, but at the very least somebody who can pick up the phone and they can say, okay, I have the citizen, I want a birth certificate from that person, I know how to get it, I don't know if I'm supposed to provide that. Or at the more open data level, somebody asks for a copy of a database or access to the database, where you say, I don't know whether I'm supposed to do this. Those are the kinds of issues that you should be capable of delegating. I think that's the only scalable way to organize it.
Well, Kai, for example, let's go to the famous business register case. Right? If I want to download an annual report of some company, I have to pay the government €2. If I want to know the beneficial owners of some company, I have to pay €1 per report. Ojaver was kind of implying that this is wrong, and also that you're hiding behind the security or privacy as a fake reason.
Privacy. Businesses don't have privacy in that sense, but
maybe the beneficial owners do. I don't know.
Well, if they are operating within a business sector, then it's not also not a privacy issue. But for example, punishment registry, or how do you? I actually don't know how it is in English. That's a question of privacy. But in general, I think it all starts with the possibility to systemize the information. And if this information is there, it doesn't mean that all of it can be obtained as open data. And if it's not possible to take this information into pieces, and you have to provide all of it, then there should be some kind of security. I mean, not in the sense of national security, but some securities in the sense of avoiding misuse of this information.
Okay, but for example, I think there are about 160,000 organizations, bodies in Estonia. So let's say 160,000 times €2, or let's say €1 per each. So for 160,000 euros, I can find out the beneficial owners of all the companies, and there is no security, no price. You have put a price on this security.
Yeah, but the price can be also security in that sense that you at least think whether you need all that information about all the companies, or do you need just information about the company you are going to have business with.
Okay, we have about 10-15 minutes left, and I already see hands in the audience, and we have a question. Let's continue.
Can I please have like 26 cents out of that €1 you're charging for my data? Thank you. You're selling my data that I generated. Can I have a cut of that money, please?
Cut of that state fee.
Yes.
And the reasonable answer is yes, you can, but then they have to raise your taxes by 20 cents per year. So I think it's probably by 30 then to cover the overhead of your request to begin with.
Okay, would you like to answer that?
No, but
No,
I think
okay,
the
yeah.
answer was...
It has
No, but
been
I think
answered.
it actually it is irrelevant. I was in a debate about 2 or 3 months ago in the UK in London. It was a very interesting one because it was a minority European, and most of the participants were from what they still call the Commonwealth, the former colonies, mostly from Asian countries. And it was about e-health and e-health research, and this is personal preference and a personal policy choice. I believe a lot in making health data available to serious research organizations, just to make sure that they can develop appropriate drugs and appropriate treatment. And I'm hugely in favor of that. I think it's too hard now and should be easier, but that's just my personal view. And we're discussing this, and there was a very strong feedback from pretty much, I think, universally with the Commonwealth population, so to speak, that shouldn't be allowed unless they were getting paid, because they very much felt this is my data, this is my health information. Companies are going to be using it. They're going to develop drugs and medication and treatments that they're going to be selling to me later on. So if they're going to be making money off of my data, I should get a cut of that. And I can't even say that they're wrong. It's not the way I look at these things. I feel that I benefit just from the fact that healthcare will get better, and if I have a serious problem, maybe I will get a better treatment because of the fact that my data was used for research purposes. Whereas they felt, no, that's not a fair economic model. If my data has value, I need to get money for it. It's not sufficient that healthcare improves. I have to actually get money, and that's a very different perspective. In Europe, at least, we have the choice, and I think it's the right one, but again, it's a personal opinion. Personal data rights are not intellectual property rights. It's not something that you can license away or that you can trade away or that you can sell. It's a fundamental right as a person, and your rights have to be respected. It would be at least unusual to say, well, I want a licensing arrangement where for my personal data use, I want to get money from that. I think also from a public policy perspective, it doesn't make much sense because, but this is a very pro-government perspective, so I'm sure I'm not speaking for everybody in the room. The government needs to provide a service. They need a budget for that. In this case, a charging model has been implemented for that. If you remove that charging model, they have to find another way to cut the cost. So I was kind of joking when I said you can have 26 cents, but only if we raise your taxes by 30 cents. But that more or less is going to be the outcome anyway. At some way, you're going to pay for that. It's different if you say, well, I don't want it to begin with. It's not actually about the 26 cents. I don't want my data to be there. That's a very different issue. But the monetization question, generally, in my view, doesn't help very much. But it's a personal opinion, not a legal.
Okay, I think Peeter has a point.
First of all, I am firmly against the idea that any public registers should be made available to the public for a fee. We are taxpayers, for Christ's sake. And secondly, regarding the rights of data subject, as Hans said, those are not intellectual property rights, those are not licensable rights, and they shouldn't be, because the next step from there would be that if somebody measures the temperature over my real estate, then I should start getting cut on the use of this temperature data or air quality data or something like that. Data subject is actually not a data subject, it's a data object.
Well, I think the question of state fees or how to monetize so-called state services, it's not only about data or registries. I mean, we don't say it is, well, we don't wonder that you have to pay a state fee if you turn or to a court, if you claim something, because then or if you want to register your car, or if you want to register your invention, then we say or we usually agree that you have to pay a state fee because it is considered as the amount of work that this state office is doing for you. And I think with regarding business registry or company registry, it's the same thing. For that money, the registry is developed, the services are developed. So, there are actually two options. Yes, you either give enough money from the budget, which is not the case with company registry, or you charge with specific services. Some services are free, some information is free, but some services are for the fee. It's not a question of open data. It is the question of how the government is actually budgeting the different services. So it cannot be actually solved just within company registry or within giving data out. It is also it's much bigger question in that sense.
But then we can sort of kill the whole open data thing in the public sector, because I think most public sector organizations probably can go out and say, in our budget, the government hasn't designated an X amount of money specifically to keep up this registry. I mean, it's our budget, it's our yearly budget, it comes from the government, but since there is no specific sum for keeping up this database, therefore I cannot open it.
There is a law, the state fees law, and it's stated in that law that when I apply to register a new company, then I pay the registration fee. If there is no provision in a law that authorizes the government to charge me for something, then I really don't understand the logic of how the government institution says that, okay, well, we have those servers to run here, and
they are expensive,
and they are expensive, and then there's this dude who is the systems administrator, and he needs salary. That's not the way it should work, in my opinion.
I think Andres has a comment also.
Yeah, well, haven't thought about it like that, but right here, I think it's the problem of then lacking the big picture in sense of budgetary decisions. I mean, okay, keeping up a registry, it works like this today, but for example, let's do all this data as open data for free. Then someone should be able to calculate how much money from the other end are we saving.
Exactly.
Because it might be like 10 or 100 times more, but everyone is doing like in their own corner something, and then in the end we don't have the connection or the people who connects two dots that, okay, here we spent, I don't know, 100,000 more, here we saved 1 million. That's the cause of that.
There's a whole floor in this super ministry called state budget in the Ministry of Finance. They are actually supposed to do that job, at least.
My next question was to be, who should take this open data flag and run with it in Estonia? Who can
It's
it
not
be?
open data flag. It's how we are budgeting the whole governmental system or all these services, and it's up to the Ministry of Finance to create these financing or budgeting models.
I heard there's like 4-something million like laying somewhere from the previous presentation that use that. I mean, I don't know.
So
We have like more than 4 million euros to come on.
but I mean, in a democracy, in a democratic government, I think it's a good question. Where should these kinds of powers or offices be situated? I mean, in Estonia, we have been arguing about the question, we should have an IT minister, somebody who develops IT. Where should it be? If we put it in a separate ministry, the other ministries don't really want to talk to this person. And if we put it, if we put it in an existing ministry, we have the same problem. Maybe we should put everything with the prime minister, but then the poor prime minister cannot do his job. So where should it be?
Well, I think IT is as many other things that are so horizontal issue that it shouldn't be a separate ministry as such. We all, just an example, internal security. We think it's just the Ministry of Interior, but it's not. Actually, every ministry has its own part of it. So, for example, Ministry of Justice, if there is a crisis, is responsible for the continuity of judicial system. So, because it's also part of internal security or prison system, remaining of prison system. So I think IT is also it's so essential part of our governance already. So it can be like a mutual agreement within the government that every ministry has a priority for open data or for IT or for whatever matter. But I don't think a specific minister will solve the problem.
Well, Hans, I will ask you, we're about to run out of time. If you could single-handedly design the system in Estonia, everything, how would you do this?
Let me fix that in the minute that we have. So
Yes, we were expecting that of you.
it is very tricky. That's what eventually was done in Belgium, which I still think is the right idea, although it's not always politically popular. We actually have a ministry that's called Services and Support. As you can imagine, it's an extremely boring ministry. No politician is ever grateful to be the Minister of Services and Support. There's no profiling possibility whatsoever. Nobody there ever talks to a citizen directly. The entire job of the Ministry of Services and Support is to provide, as the name says, at least it's transparent, services and support to other ministries. The ironic thing is that even though this is a very politically unattractive ministry, it is actually hugely powerful because it manages all the infrastructure that all of the others need. And this isn't just about IT. They provide, for instance, also the HR support, where all the civil servants are managed. They provide support in drafting legislation, translation and interpreters, which Belgium is a multilingual country, we have to have that as well. And they provide IT services, do the application development, service development, mainly for the federal ministerial level, but increasingly also for the communes that they can sign up to. Having that is very important because, at least for new initiatives, it creates the option for the government to say, the services and support guys will do that. It doesn't work very well to clean up historical parts because every ministry has its own IT infrastructure and their own personnel, and nobody wants to lose budget, which is mainly what it's about. No, I have my servers, I have my 15 guys working on it. I know it could be better and cheaper for you to do it, but I want to keep them. So it doesn't solve all of the problems, but at the very least it gives you a centralized component and a central service that you can use. And that's very practical also for the open data perspective, because this is the people who will, their job is to understand these issues. It's not an additional thing that they also have to do in addition to their real job. They can focus on those problems. And that, I think, is not popular because, again, nobody wants to be the Minister of Services and Support. But it is a very important job and I think a very practical one as well.
Okay, so you have created a ministry in Estonia.
You're very welcome. That'll be 30 cents per year for every taxpayer, if I budget it correctly.
Kas saalil on äkki küsimusi? Meil on aeg hakata siin otsi vaikselt kokku tõmbama. Küsige inglise keeles, küsige eesti keeles, kuidas soovi on, et siis. Any questions? Jah. Mikrofon tuleb lähema 5 minuti jooksul.
I have a question that I guess goes back to Hans's presentation, and it's probably a question for the lawyers in the panel. So on the one hand side, we have the PSI directive, the public sector information framework that mandates public sector organizations to publish data in a way that is easily reusable and redistributable by the public. On the other hand side, we have the GDPR, which everybody's afraid of, and which it basically says don't mess with personal data. So as a public sector organization, are these two frameworks actually driving me in opposite directions, or is there a good middle way between the two in actually doing open data in a way that respects personal data protection?
Well, very briefly from my side, there's inherently a tension. I don't think you can deny that. One of them says take good care of your data and the other says make it available. So that inherently it's going to make people nervous. But I think the main part of the GDPR is responsibility, accountability, and being able to justify what you do with your data. And historically, public administrations never had to do that. You mentioned it already, there's a huge amount of information, a huge amount of data out there, where in some cases we don't even know anymore why a public administration has it, other than they've always asked for it and they've always gotten it. Same with publicity, data that we make publicly available, published in the official journal. That used to be fine when it's just paperwork, but now everything is on a website, and if you Google it, people will find out all sorts of details about you. I think we're at the point, well, we've been at the point a couple of years where there's been a need for rebalancing there to look at what kind of data that public administrations actually need, and also to rebalance what it means to make data publicly available and whether we still want that. And if you look at simple stuff like bankruptcy decisions in Belgium, they are published in the official journal. So you can go to a law library and find bankruptcy decisions from 1830. They were publicly available in the sense that everybody could read the official journal, but obviously in 1830 nobody ever did that. It was only 20 people who got the official journal and only 2 of them actually read it probably. Nowadays if you publish it on the official website, type somebody's name and you find out that they went bankrupt 10 years ago. That's how it works. And this is one of those situations where you have to say, okay, publicity nowadays isn't what it was 100 years ago. So maybe we need to reevaluate whether we still want to make that data fully publicly available and whether we want to go in as much detail. And the same applies really to any kind of public sector information case. Yes, openness is good. And I don't think that if personal data is contained in your public sector information, then you should keep it closed. But it does mean that we need to reflect more carefully on what data we have, what we want to make publicly available, and for which kind of purposes. I think that's, to me, is the main message. There is a tension, but it is solvable.
And for how long?
And for how long,
Yep.
indeed, and for how long. And I think that is solvable, but it requires reflection. And I think the easiest answer would be PSI wins or GDPR wins, and a lot of people favor one or the other position because it makes life easy for them. Basically saying, I can't give it to you because of privacy reasons is essentially the same as saying GDPR wins. And I don't think that's, in some cases it might be true, but it's not a universally correct answer. You cannot switch off your brain. It requires a reflection.
Well, do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you need to balance. The thing is what makes it complicated and also makes the GDPR very complicated is finding the balance between privacy and the overall good or public interest or such things. And that's, you know, right now probably as you said, the axe of 20 million is quite you know, out of balance thing if you need to decide, and from the other side, there's like nothing much to weigh it.
So if we had another X, we had two X's.
Yeah,
20
if you
million
don't
each.
make it public, you're gonna get another
Yes.
20 million.
Then
Well,
Why not?
luckily in Estonia, you can't find a public or governmental institution.
Yeah, that's good.
So there is no
Yeah, but-
axe in that
Yeah,
sense.
but I mean, this balancing, or as lawyers know, this proportionality assessment, how much privacy should we invade into in a personal level in order to make our all lives better? So, and it's especially important in public sector, because if some company does some silly decisions, I might have a chance to change the service provider. But I don't want to move out from Estonia because they do wrong decisions in sense of my privacy. So,
But in
that's-
the end, you can only find the balance. I mean, the balance will be tested in court. That's the ultimate battleground, isn't it? I think it's a balance. The Data Protection Agency thinks it's not a balance, and suddenly I'm in court. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be there.
Well-
Therefore, I will side with GDPR because that's much safer.
now with GDPR, you might even find yourself in a data protection board in Brussels before the going to European Court. Isn't it so? Yeah.
You wouldn't get a fine directly from the European
Yeah,
Data
no, no,
Protection
no.
Board. It will always be a national one, but and in principle it should be your own data protection board that fines you. But there is some discussion ground there.
All right. Veel küsimusi? More questions? No? I thought I saw someone's hand. I didn't. In that case, aitäh, thank you. Thank you for the panel.